knowing that, God has a purpose and a plan. He gifted us these kids. These are our blessing. It's our duty to raise them up, and just knowing who's pouring into your kids. And time is a gift too, and we're not promised a lot of it. And just making sure that we're being intentional with the time that we are spending with our kids, whether that be all day or only a few hours a day if you're sending them away.
Welcome into another episode of Making the Leap. This is a special episode we're calling Mom to Mom, where once a month I'll speak to moms who are focused on raising kids with a biblical worldview and all that entails. And I'm so excited for today's episode because while it's the first, it's also with somebody that I've known for a while. I consider her a great friend, and she has such a good story that I think will be inspiring for anybody who's listening, who's kind of thinking about making some switches with education, but also maybe has some questions about faith and what that does for a family when you kind of step into that. So with that, I'm so pleased to welcome Megan Lewis. Megan, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I've been looking forward to this for a while, thinking a lot about you in particular, because your family has kind of a story that I think has been typical for some people who started in one place in education, really debated about what that was going to look like if they made that move, popped on over to, what I jokingly kind of call the good side, although that's not fair to public educators around. I don't want to be insulting them. But I think it's fun because you not only did that, but this isn't something that has been in your head for a long time. It's been more of a recent shift. So I'd like to kind of just take our listeners through that journey a little bit first, and then kind of go into the education piece. So if you don't mind, first of all, just so people know what your professional background is, what do you do as your job, your job job? What does that look like?
So I work for U.S. Bank full-time from home. I've been working from home since 2018, and I work on the operations side. So behind the scenes stuff, I cover a handful of branches in the footprint, about 67, I think now. Okay. So, yeah.
So not a teaching background.
Nope.
Not any type of education that would have prepped you for anything with schooling and that kind of thing when it comes to kids.
No.
Okay.
Real life experience, but no formal education.
But not the psychology, sociology, that kind of thing with kids. And I think that's really important because that is one of the hang-ups. In fact, I was just sharing with you this weekend that I ran into a woman who said, I have concerns about people when they start homeschooling and things, especially if they don't have an education background. So just kind of hang on to that thought as we get there. And then as far as your story in terms of Christianity, I love this about you because I feel like most of the people I know now are like, I've been in this church for 30 years. My grandparents went here, my parents. And there isn't, I love talking with people where that isn't always the story, because I think people think if you don't accept Christ as a young person or have that total base, you're never going to get there. And I think that's a fallacy. So can you share a little bit about your personal journey? And if you obviously want to bring in a little bit of your husband's as well, that's fine. Just kind of your journey as a Christian.
Okay.
And I know that's a big topic, but I know you can share kind of the pieces.
Yeah, I started going to church in high school with some friends. We just went to youth group and then added on church camps and stuff like that. And I became a believer in high school. I got baptized. I ended up going to a Christian university for 1.5 semesters.
And was that your choice or was that parent choice?
No, that was 100% my choice.
Okay.
And then quickly realized that being in college was not my thing. So I dropped out of college, and then that's where my faith kind of slipped away. Met my husband, and once I started working from home is kind of when things started to pick back up with my faith journey. So
why was that, do you think? Why was being home, why was that sort of a catalyst?
I think back, and I had a friend that would send me sermons. Sometimes she was actually my old manager. And I look back at all the people that God placed in my life during that time of absence, per se. And so many of them were big influences on kind of pulling me back in to the faith. So
then you're hearing, you're listening to sermons. You've got this kind of coworker. You're married. When did when did the kids come along into play with that? Had they already been born? Was that all prior to kids being born?
Yep. So this was in 2018. So I had already had all 3 kids at that point, 2 of which were in school, and then 1 in like preschool or home at that time. And, I started really digging deep into sermons and just listening to Christian music all the time. And that's kind of when I've pulled back in. And it took a couple of years before I realized like how important it was, and how important it was to bring my whole family along with me.
And how did you do that? How did you, when you say bring your whole family along with you, I know what that would look like, or the absence of it look like. What does that look like for you? And I think this is important too, because it doesn't have to look, and it shouldn't look the same for every single family. So for yours, for the Lewis family, what is that? What does that involve? At that time, that 2018, 2019.
So it took a lot, but I like broke down and cried out to the Lord, like, I need somebody along this journey with me. I cannot do this on my own. And so I started praying at night when Jason and I would fall asleep. We typically would hold hands as we fell asleep, and I would just try to keep myself awake as long as I could and just pray for his heart to be turned towards God. And that happened eventually. So
yours basically was first. You kind of were leading the way versus him. That's also really interesting too, because I know, again, we just finished a sermon series, or not finished, but we're in a sermon series in church, right? Talking about submission, which some people want to look at as like the hands off, can't discuss it. But you were leading, and he was kind of following, but that God was working in that. How much further, I don't want to tell him to forgive me, but behind you was he? Like where in that path was he? As you're praying and you're hoping and you're knowing that you can't do this alone, was he saying like, but you're not alone, you've got me? Like, was that part of it, or was it just he was in a different place? I think we both have always had that pull towards, there is a God. And so I don't think that he was too much further behind me. And I never really took such a deep dive that I was like, knew my Bible in and out. And so I think that we were kind of on the same page. I was just maybe 1 or 2 steps ahead. And I think the really cool thing is I've been able to, over the past few years, been able to kind of switch my role a little bit and kind of step back and see him take the lead in our family. So. And that's an amazing thing to watch. I know we've kind of had the same thing. I've often talked, I don't know if I've said it here in an episode yet. It's kind of hard to remember after multiple episodes, but one of the biggest moments that I think that Chris and I had was kind of during that COVID era when our church was closed and we didn't know what we were going to be doing, where we were going to go. And I kind of was at a point where I was like, what does it even matter? Why are we even bothering? We're supposed to be praying. We're supposed to be in church. And I was like, I don't even want to go anymore. I don't know what it's about. And he was like, we'll find a new church, but we're not having you on one plane and me on the other. And we're going to come together on this. And it was probably the first time. And that was like 20 years of marriage where I really hadn't heard him say like, we're doing this together and it's really not an option. And it wasn't in a bossy way. It was in a, no, we need to be united, together on this. And it was pretty profound and powerful. And I was like, oh, okay, well, let's go find a new church then. Off we go. And that started us. So I think I identify with what you're saying, because again, I don't have that, like, we were married and, together and Bible study all the time from the time, we don't have that. So then as you're there, Jason kind of switches, I don't want to say switches, but he's like, okay, I'm here, and he's leading now. You've got your kids where in school? What is happening with your kids in terms of their ages and their education? Okay, so we have a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, and an 8-year-old. Okay. Our 8 and 10-year-old both go to a Christian private school. Okay. My 12-year-old is in her first year of homeschool in 7th grade. So okay. Had you have you always had them in Christian school, private school, homeschooling, or did you start in public?
Started in public. My oldest went kindergarten through 4th grade.
Okay.
My middle daughter went kindergarten through 2nd. Okay. And then my youngest just did kindergarten for
just
public.
Kindergarten. Mm-hmm. Okay. What was your, I guess I would say your pull to take them from that setting and put them in a different one? Mm-hmm. What were some of the things that were happening that you were kind of like, this isn't working, or we want something different? What was going on?
Well, it was the beloved year of 2020, whenever my eyes started to open up to different ideas of what education should look like. And let's see. So Maylee was in 4th grade, so she was getting ready to head into her last year of elementary school. Okay. We had a great elementary school. Mm-hmm. I really can't complain. Mm-hmm. We had a lot of Christians, a lot of people that went to our church that were teachers there. So I had really no major complaints about the elementary school, but it was the schools following that I had a lot of concerns. I had a lot of friends that had kids that were dealing with a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And I just really didn't feel comfortable with sending my kids. And so at that point, we actually started toying around with the idea of pulling them out and homeschooling them.
Okay.
Once they hit 6th grade. So we're kind of like full circle right back around to our original idea.
And when you were thinking about homeschooling and you've got, almost to middle school and then a couple of elementary, when you're in that place and you and your husband are talking about it, what were some of the concerns you had about it? What were some of the fears or the worries that you had about making that leap, so to speak?
Well, I mean, you don't want to pull them away from friends that they've already made. I think that was one of the biggest things. And just, just really trusting the process and trusting that God has other plans. And, I don't know.
Did you do a lot of research? Are you more of a, I'm going to jump in and we're just going to figure it out? Or are you a type A, I'm going to research A, B, C, D and figure it all out before I start something?
I'm more of I need to know other people's real life experiences. Okay. So I did a lot of, not necessarily researching, but kind of like searching for people that I knew that had gone down different paths and really just understanding their why and, the ins and outs of everything.
So you're thinking about homeschooling. Did you talk to your kids at that point about it, or was this all like the behind the scenes mom and dad kind of convos before you bring it to the kids?
We've always been so open with our kids in conversation. So they've been involved in the conversations from pretty much the get-go.
And what did they say?
They were pretty excited about it from the get-go. So
why do you think that is? Why? Because that is when you're worried about pulling them from friends and they're saying, oh, but this kind of sounds interesting. That's quite a difference right there. So why do you think they were excited? What made them, and maybe not turning cartwheels, but they were okay. They were okay.
I think they liked the idea of not having to sit in school for 8 hours a day. I think kids just naturally know that that's not what they're intended to do. They want to move. They want to be busy. They want to play. They want to be outside. And so I think they just naturally know what it is that they
like to be a kid, kind of that whole idea. Yeah. And that is true. And that is something that I think when you, and again, I don't homeschool, so I don't fully know, but I like you have said a little bit, I'm around a lot of people who homeschool. Yeah. And I was exposed to it early on through my sister. And the more I learned and the more I could kind of couple that with what I knew from teaching, that there's a reason you're always told in a classroom, get them up and moving, get them up and moving, get them up and moving, because they're not supposed to be sitting, right? It's just not good for us. So I think that's interesting that they wanted that. Were you considering Christian homeschooling? Like there's that classical Christian mode of things. There's just plain old homeschooling. And then there's the idea of, we're going to have maybe Bible time, or we're going to use that biblical worldview throughout. Were you thinking of any of that? Or was it just, let's start with moving them first and then go from there?
So initially our thought process was not anywhere near Christian formed education, just because we were still like right in the midst of getting ready to start going to church.
So you weren't even in church fully at that time?
Nope.
Oh my gosh, that is fascinating. So you were just thinking, we're going. Like we're maybe gonna pull them, or maybe gonna do this. But I say this, I have said this a lot. I didn't even really know there was a term like biblical worldview. I didn't know that until we went through our first kind of search process, and that's when I kind of was like, what is this? And not even realizing, right? So I think that's interesting. And it kind of helps validate me a little bit too, that not everybody is even aware that that is a thought, right? So you're thinking about doing this. You're not really considering, it's not really Christian. It's just a homeschool piece. But you didn't homeschool right then and there.
Right.
So talk a little bit about that. What was kind of your decision there, or your process, I should say?
Yeah. So as we were on that journey and, rounding out Maylee's 4th grade year, is when we started going to church, and an opportunity for a Christian education kind of fell into our laps.
Which was what? Can you share that a little bit? What was that opportunity?
Yeah, so our church actually bought a building, and they were going to be housing a satellite version of a bigger Christian school in our church building, which was in our town where we live. And so that was going to be opening up that fall as the first year. And so that's where that journey started.
So God was kind of like, here you go.
Opening doors, yeah.
So that's different then. You're thinking homeschooling, and then this comes along and you're like, oh, okay, well, maybe
it was an opportunity to kind of pull them all out at once, and get them into a different atmosphere. And it ended up working out really well. So
what were some challenges that you came up against as you were considering that? Because frankly, I mean, when we talk about private education, that's not free.
Right.
There's, it's not free. Homeschooling is the only one that even remotely comes close to that. And even then it's not. So that's not free. You work, your husband works, but you have 3 kids.
Yeah.
So how does that work?
Well, when I say that everything kind of fell into our lap, I literally mean everything from the school being in our town to me working from home and being able to transport them back and forth to the financial piece. I think I've said it before on this podcast. We're a product of the Herzog Foundation, and we are so blessed to have had that opportunity.
And you're talking about kind of like that, the Herzog, the Mo Scholars, the money, the tax, the kind of that the program.
Yeah,
that's involved.
We were able to use that scholarship to get all 3 of our kids in the door. And I won't specifically say, but whenever I calculated how much it was going to cost, it was almost like you can't say no.
Which is incredible, right? Which is incredible. And I know that right now that's not available to everybody. That's something that Chris and I work on and talk about a lot, because we want parents to be able to kind of have that opportunity and have that option where it isn't such a hard dive deep into the purse and make extravagant, crazy switches. Although I know people that have done that too, and that's, you do what you need to do. So you had it all coincidentally work out, which we know it's not a coincidence. We know that's God 100%. Does that strengthen your faith at that point? Are you like, I'm all in now, or are you still thinking, oh, that's funny how that worked out?
I mean, at this point, we had kind of taken a pretty big leap with our faith. I mean, all 3 kids at this point were believers. Like, our house was like on fire.
What does that mean? Your house was on fire. What is that?
I mean, so we started going to church. I mean, the kids deep dove into learning verses and all of that. And
did they do that on their own?
No.
So where did that come from?
Not 100%. I mean, we just knew that it was important to incorporate that in our house.
By praying? Are you doing devotionals with them?
We do devotionals with them every night. We had somebody gift us a kid's Bible version, and so we would read those stories every night with them. And that actually started before Jason even came to church. So I'm kind of like going back and forth in our story, but we would read the kids' Bible every night, and eventually he started coming in the room as we were doing it, and we just kind of grew from there.
Which is incredible when you can use the Bible, which is what biblical worldview is about, using that Bible to filter everything. And so then all of a sudden, I think that's the piece that clicked for me, was that it isn't just for education purposes, which I think sometimes, I think when we talk about biblical worldview here, we are talking about it as education, but really it's I'm really frustrated with, the person at work who's doing this. Well, biblically, what does that Bible say to me about how to treat people? And I think that's such a different mindset than relying fully on myself or getting mad or angry or any of those things, right? You're using what God says to do. And so I think that's amazing, actually, that your kids are part of that journey for your husband as well.
And they've strengthened us. Like,
how so? I think that's a big statement to make.
I remember back when, this was pretty early on. We had sirens going down the street behind us. And I remember my middle daughter being like, oh my gosh, we need to pray for them. Like, something could be going on. And this was before, I'm almost positive if I'm remembering correctly, this was before she was even fully a believer at that point, or hadn't admitted to us that she was. So yeah, it's just the childlike faith, and they've really just brought us along, and like seeing how much they rely on God in their little minds.
It is. It's a tremendous thing to watch when your kids can be the ones that are thought-provoking and you have to step back and, number one, thank God, because how amazing that he uses them, right?
Yeah.
But then that he also is doing it to kind of encourage you and kind of strengthen you. So you have this school opportunity, you've got the financial opportunity, and you went ahead and you put your kids into this school.
Yes.
Is it a big school? Is it a small school? For people that don't know, tell us a little bit about that.
It was tiny for the first year. I think that there was 8 elementary, so that was 1st through 5th. There was 8 of them.
That's a big deal and a big hang up for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Did it worry you at all that it was that small, or was
no? Honestly, it was. I had a lot of peace about the situation, and the kids were so excited, so that kind of like pushed me. And just knowing like they were all together. All day long. My 2 girls were actually in the same classroom as 3rd and 5th graders.
That's pretty unique too, because again, when we talk about more of a secular education experience, I think we're told, I need my break, I need my space, I need my time as a parent from kids, but then also kid to kid. I know a lot of people, well, I don't want to say a lot, but I know some people who are parents of multiples, of twins, or more so, and they wanted to make sure kids were separated and spread out and not with each other all day because they're at home together. So I think that's really interesting that you're calling it a peaceful situation versus something where you're pushing something that maybe isn't as natural for some.
I mean, honestly, we noticed a huge difference in our kids after going to this smaller school and being together 24/7. They would come home and they would play together. They would not like lose that, bond that they created. It almost like deepened it. I don't know. It was pretty crazy. I
think that's tremendous. And I think it is a food for thought for people who, again, trying to make sure that we don't, as parents, fall into the trap of what everybody else is doing, but kind of stick with what we know to be right or good for our families.
I mean, God put us all together, as a family. Like, why should we want to be apart? I think the way that they have grown their bonds together, and I mean, still, like, they're off school this week, all week, and they're playing every day together. I mean, it's just, that's what God created all of us for, and so put us together for.
I think that piece, like, you've kind of got it. It's all kind of going on, right? It's all there together. Everything's working, and still, here you are now. Fast forward a couple of years. This is the part that I've been excited to talk to you about all of this, but this is the part that I also thought was very important, because I have myself gotten stuck in, we like made this switch, we made this change, done. I don't need to do it again. I don't need to worry, I don't need to worry about it. It may not be always perfect, but it's fine. It is what it is. I don't want to make that switch. I don't want to make another upheaval. I don't want to cause upheaval basically in my family by doing more. And Chris and I have talked a lot about, we do regret that a little bit with our older kids, and we can't sit in that place of regret all the time, but we thought we had done enough by moving them from a big district to a small district. It was enough. We thought we had done enough with moving our daughter into a small, a different place. So you, though, you're ready to switch and make another change. Can you talk a little bit about what you chose to do and a little bit about why?
Yeah. So the first year, all 3 of my kids were together in the small satellite school. The following year, which was last year, my oldest went on to the big campus for 6th grade because they didn't have 6th grade at the small
and for
campus.
People that maybe aren't familiar, that big campus, it is a lot bigger. It's still not your big suburban school, but it's bigger.
Yeah.
And we're talking about 500 kids, probably ish, little over 500 now, from K through 12. So that's a switch from here's a little group. Yes. Here's a little group of 8, like, together, your group of 20 as it grew into.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
And so as the year went on, we started to think about, is this really what we wanted? Is this what we envisioned? I think we were so blessed with that first year of the small campus, and that how much she learned that year and how much she grew academically that year from the small more one-on-one learning environment. That's where I started to really think, okay, maybe this wasn't the right move for this year.
So still Christian education, but maybe the fact that the size was different, or maybe you're introducing a lot more different teaching styles and things that don't always line up. I mean, it's just a common fact, I think, of education, right? That, when you have 15, even if it's a small class, 15 kids or 17 kids, that's a lot as a teacher to have to try to meet those different learning styles and those learning needs.
Well, so and she was switching, every 45 minutes to a different class, different teacher. And so we just started to think back to what that previous year looked like and how much of a blessing that was for not only for us as a family, but for her education and how much she grew. And that's when we really started thinking about, well, maybe we do need to look into another option.
And what do you say? So now you're thinking, and you can't go back to the school where you were because they're not offering. They're just little enough that's not an option, right? Yeah. And so are you kind of regretful? Are you hesitant? Are you worried? Or are you at peace with, we're gonna switch it up again. We're gonna change this.
No, I wasn't regretful. I think she developed some really good friendships, and it was a good challenge for her to have all of those opportunities. But we were at peace with the decision that, the next step is pulling her home and doing homeschool for, who knows, maybe a year, maybe 2 years, maybe the rest of her high school. So
then when you do that, you're talking about a middle school age, right? What about those friendships? What about that? The people that always, I don't want to say always, but people that are kind of like, what about her social piece? Because that was your initial worry going to pulling them out and homeschooling. You find a school, they've got this social piece. Now you've got her in a bigger school, lots of social, but you're pulling her again. What does that look like for her? How do you maintain that when you move from one situation to another?
Yeah, I mean, we are at church every Wednesday and Sunday, so she's got lots of friends there. She also does a Discovery Homeschool Academy. So it's a little plug-in on one day a week where they go and they do some classes, and she's with a group of kids anywhere from, I believe it's 7th through 12th grade is her classroom group that she's with. So she's getting that opportunity there too. So
that's really, I actually really like that. And I don't think I knew that she was doing that part of it too. So that's the part that I think that God provides, right? Like provides those opportunities. Not that going to the bank or the post office or the grocery store isn't social. And I think that's a misconception actually of homeschooling. Like that's the real world. School classrooms are not the real world. You're not with people your same age, learning place, all that, right? Like real life is going out and interacting everywhere. So now she's with 7th to 12th graders. Yep. And what kind of classes, what kind of experiences does she have in that setting? Because that's kind of that co-op piece that we've talked about before.
Yes.
So what is that for her?
They do art, PE. She has a logic and reasoning class, a government class, public speaking, I think is one of them. Okay. I'm probably missing one, but there's a handful of different classes, and there's 2 teachers that teach for that age range. So again, it's knowing who's pouring into your kids, and it's a lot easier when it's on a smaller level.
That's so true. That is a conversation I have a lot with people, that it isn't, especially when you talk about public education, for example, and like you mentioned, great people teaching your kids at the time, Christians that are pouring into your kids, but you can't control it all. However, when you homeschool, when you're looking at a co-op, when you're in a small 20 student school, you do have a much better idea, I think, of who's around your kids, not just the adults, but also the students. And that's not to say that there aren't challenges within those settings, because that's life. That's always going to be, right? Yeah. So you have now moved. So just to recap for people, because I think this is the part that probably is one of my pet peeves, I think, when we talk about making the leap. The people, when they're afraid to make that switch, which I understand, but then they're afraid to make it again, or they don't want to entertain that idea. So you've gone from, maybe we'll homeschool, small Christian school, we're going to homeschool again, and we don't know where we're going to be in another couple of years. Yeah. And you're okay with that. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that piece of it, that you are looking ahead, you're homeschooling right now? Do you think about homeschooling her as a sophomore or a junior, or do you think, I'm not the one for that, but we're going to find opportunities? What are some of the conversations that you and Jason have had? I
mean, I think there's just so much out there. There's so many different, online schools or different curriculums, or, there's just different options. And I don't think that every kid is the same. And not every kid is the same every year. And so what they need can change. And so I think it's a lot of, just making sure that we're staying true to God and what His will is for our family, and just making sure that we're looking at all those options and doing what's best in the moment, and not really thinking too far ahead. Because I feel like that's where all the anxieties start to wrap in, when you think so far ahead, and we're not promised tomorrow. So why worry about it?
I think that's a really, really big statement, and an important statement, right? We can't make these decisions now for 5 years. We do have to kind of think a little bit about, well, what's best for this year? What's best for this semester? And even I have conversations, Chris and I have conversations with our daughters sometimes, like, let's go through this year and we'll see, or let's go through this class and then we'll see, or let's, and I've gotten much better at that piece than just saying, you're fine and you're going to be where you're going to be for the next 2, 3, 4 years. Yeah. How is it with kids in multiple places doing different things? You've got one homeschool, 2 in a small, brick and mortar school. How does that work out? Are there challenges that you kind of have to figure out?
I think the biggest challenge is the jealousy piece, which we're all working on. Not.
What do you mean?
Well, obviously, Maylee gets to be home, and the other 2 have to go to school most days. So
they're jealous of her being home.
I think they can be on occasion, yeah. But just really working on, being grateful for everybody's opportunities, and being happy for everybody's opportunities, and not really trying to put yourself in that situation. Like, you have a purpose where you're at, and the opportunity is possible in the future for you to come home to. We'll revisit that when that time comes.
Right.
So it's, I wouldn't say anything else is a challenge. I guess maybe.
How is it working from home? You're working from home, and you've got one doing homeschool. So again, there are people, and this is where the homeschool world kind of is a little bit wonky too, is a little bit different, right? Because there are the groups that are like, full all in, I'm with my kid 24/7. And then there's some that are like, no, we're going to, this is the way it's going to work for our family. And there's that kind of, I don't want to say clash, but there is a little bit of a headbutt sometimes going on with the different modes, I would say, of homeschooling. So how does that work with you being home?
We've got a pretty good system down right now. It took a minute to get it figured out, but she does a lot of it on her own.
Okay.
But
is it online? Are you doing an online program?
I gave her 2 options to look through, and one of them was going to be primarily online, and the other one that she chose is more of workbook. She does watch a few videos to kind of like walk her through the lesson, and then she kind of does it on her own after that. but I'm there we work side by side. So if she ever has any questions or needs help with anything, she knows that she can turn to me and ask. And if we need to walk through something a little bit more when I'm on a break or off work, we can certainly do that. So
I think that's really neat. I think that flexibility, and what an amazing option you've been afforded, that you are at home and able to kind of help facilitate that. I know I was thinking back to when I started working from home remotely, and it was actually right in the middle of COVID. And I thought, well, okay, I mean, there's no better time, right? I've got my computer, you're sitting here at this table on your computer, and we'll work through through all this together. So I think that's amazing. What are, I guess, if there were people that are not sure, they're just not sure about what they want to do when it comes to their kids, or maybe when it comes to making a switch, making that leap, so to speak, into whatever it is for their family. Is there a Bible verse, or is there a story in the Bible that you look to, that you kind of rest in a little bit, that helps with that assurance piece that maybe somebody else might benefit from?
Yeah. I mean, I think the one that everybody probably always goes to is, train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he's older, he won't depart from it. And I cling to that one a lot. One of the first Bible verses that I ever memorized was 2 Timothy 1:7. For God,
which I have to say is absolutely my favorite, but you'll probably have it memorized better than me, but go ahead.
For God has not given us the spirit of fear, but one of power and love and sound mind. And so clinging to that. And then I have one more that I always think of too in any circumstance, not necessarily just on my kids, but Romans 8:28. And we know that for those who love God, everything works out for good. And I probably butchered that, but that's okay.
I literally
something along those lines. But yeah, I just knowing that, God has a purpose and a plan. He gifted us these kids. These are our blessing. It's our duty to raise them up, and just knowing who's pouring into your kids. And time is a gift too, and we're not promised a lot of it. And just making sure that we're being intentional with the time that we are spending with our kids, whether that be all day or only a few hours a day if you're sending them away. So.
Well, it's so true when you talk about time. That isn't ours always, and not in a catastrophic way, but we often share with you as we're sitting in church and we look over and see your three sitting right there. And I get a little jealous, like, I missed that piece of when they were tinier and younger, but it's that's the circle of life. That's how it goes. But because we are not given that, we're not promised them to stay young at 4th grade, 5th grade, 7th grade, always. We don't know what the future holds. I think it's really imperative that parents think. And
I look at couples that have kids even younger than mine, and I'm probably doing the same thing that you're doing. Like, oh man, if only I could have gotten them at that age.
Right. But don't you think though that you got them at the time they needed to be, right? You got there as a Christian. You're getting there. You're continuing to grow exactly as it was intended.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things I told our pastor recently was, after about a year of going to church, we asked our kids if they remembered not going to church on Sundays, and they were like, no.
Wow.
And I just think, how awesome is God that he's given us this opportunity, and like they don't know any different. Like,
that's amazing.
So I just think that he can do anything,
Absolutely. So. Well, I 100%. I feel like that is a good little mic drop moment, right? God can do anything. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing your story. I appreciate you coming on. I know that you've spoken with Emily with Heart and Soul Homeschool. I know that we have spoken with you individually, but not this in depth, not hearing kind of that background. And I'm glad, because I think it just goes to show that God really can work in any of our circumstances, in any of our hearts, at anything within his time frame. Like, it's always on his plan. But I appreciate you sharing what you did today. And hopefully for people that are listening and watching, they've enjoyed kind of this episode where it's just me. It just gets to be me. But I really think these mom-to-mom conversations they're really important. We appreciate you watching today's episode, and we hope you enjoyed it. Reach out and let us know your thoughts on the show. Thank you again for being here. And as always, check out our show notes for more information, and we'll see you next time. Making the Leap is a podcast presentation courtesy of the Herzog Foundation. We'd love your feedback by rating us and commenting on the show.
And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on Making the Leap.